Hello everybody, welcome to the English and Maths talk here at the virtual event for Wixham's Academy's Open Evening. I am Alexa Hill and I'm very proud to say that I am the Head of English here at Wixham's Academy.
And I'm Adam White, I'm the Head of Faculty for Maths, also at Wixham's Academy. We've both been here for 3 years now, and yeah, it's a real pleasure to be able to welcome you to an event like this.
So in preparation for this evening, usually you would get to wander around and have a little chat with us. So what we've tried to do is preempt some of the frequently asked questions that we usually get at open evenings. And we're going to try and talk through some of those things and hopefully cover some of the questions that you may have if you are looking for your student to join us here at Wixham's next year.
And added to that, we'll finish with a question and answer session. So if throughout what we're saying, you think of anything else that we haven't covered or anything that you'd like to throw away, then you'll find a Q&A chat box that you can put things in, and we'll try and deal with those at the end. So, Mrs. Hill, how do you organise the English course? What is it that you read during Year 7?
So secondary English is actually quite different to primary English studies. So students will have had a very large focus on literacy and punctuation, which we still carry forward, but they start to apply those things in their own writing and look at 2 different disciplines. So part of our course is an English literature course, which means that we read plays and poems and novels, and we talk about our interpretations of those texts, and part of it is an English language specialism where we start to really unpick how language is used for effect. So there's a much bigger focus on analysis at secondary level than there is at primary level. In Year 7, students experience a little bit of all of it, to be honest with you. So we start off with a dystopian unit, so we're going to be reading The Hunger Games, and we build into that some exploration of the text and some analysis work, but also some creative writing. And then as we move through, they study a range of things, including speeches. We're an Oracy 21 trained school, so we have a very big focus on verbal literacy with students and being able to present themselves verbally. And we also have a look at creative writing, both in fiction and non-fiction styles. And we read Romeo and Juliet and a collection of poetry at Year 7 as well. Mr. White, what are Year 7s looking at with you in maths?
Yeah, well, as with English, Year 7 represents the first year really of our plan towards the one-year GCSE course. So it's our opportunity really to build that fluency in different arithmetic techniques. It's really exciting when Year 7s join us, and they've always done a lot of practice for their SATs, and we like to build upon that, all the confidence they have in those different methods, and take it further, really. There's a real focus on concepts around proportion as well, which again is a big theme of the GCSE going forward. It's an idea, proportion, that touches on so many different areas of mathematics that we get in right in Year 7 and start doing that. We'll look at use of numbers, we'll look at fractions, decimals, percentages, we'll look at algebraic expressions and substitutions, simple graphs. We really cover the whole mathematical map and get some of the foundations in right from the beginning. So another question we often get asked is, it tends to be about support. So in the English department, what things would you encourage someone that happens in the English department if they're struggling particularly?
Absolutely. So we have a range of support available on a personalised scale. So we're very big on personalising learning at Wixham's Academy. If you have a child who has a specific need and you're working alongside the learning support team, or perhaps they have a care plan in place, they will often have TA support in lessons, and we will all obviously engage with that EHCP plan and put as much as we can in place. For other students who just need that extra help with their learning and their confidence, we've got a variety of things available. So within our lessons, in every task, we have something embedded called the Blue Clue, and that gives students little prompts, reminders, could be sentence starters, writing frames that will help them access that part of the learning. And they also get a lot of one-to-one time with the teacher as they move around the classroom, where we'll have conversations with the students and help them individually as they need it. We do also have a really big focus on sort of peer discussion and peer support. So we do have some English ambassadors within certain classrooms, and we will also ask students to start to feel comfortable with each other and interact with each other and ask each other questions. So they should have lots of interaction between us and students within the class that can help them, as well as the resources that are available in the classroom as well. Mr. White, if
Yeah.
I am a little bit nervous about maths, what kind of
Well,
support is available to me?
Yeah, and obviously picking up all the things that you're talking about from English, we'll see similar things in the maths classroom. It's really important to us that we teach through, well, certainly through year 7 and going forward later in the school. We really believe in mixed ability groups, partly because of what you were talking about there in English, about making sure that there's peer support. The mixed ability teaching, I think, is a real strength, and it means that every student gets the full extent of the maths course or the English course. They're never going to be excluded from seeing certain elements of what we might be teaching. So the support has to fit into that. But beyond the classroom, there's also lots of intervention strategies. We will select those kids that might need just a little confidence boost to get to really engage with what's happening around them, and that's what the intervention is focused at. It's certainly available for year 7 students, and it tends to be focused, and it tends to be short term, like a program to focus on a particular skill and encourage them to build their confidence, so that as they sit in their lessons, they can engage with everything that's happening around them. Similar, the intervention's similar in English, isn't it? As I understand it.
Yes, so we've got some small intervention groups that also work with students who perhaps just need a few weeks of sort of a booster in certain skills. And at the moment, we have them running in literacy skills, reading skills, and handwriting skills.
Yeah.
And similarly to maths, in year 7 particularly, taught in very mixed ability groups with their tutor group. So the idea is that they stay with their tutor group and hopefully create some connections socially with lots of new faces, and they get that time to feel confident to explore things with people that they know. What about, Mr. White, our more able students in maths?
Yeah, more able.
We've heard the support, what's the challenge?
Well, the other end of having those mixed ability groups is the opportunity for those that are more confident then to not only study mathematics, but to sort of stretch themselves as they try to explain that, as they articulate what it is they're doing to other people in the classroom. That's a really important way that a more confident student can challenge themselves. One thing to be able to do it. It tends to be a whole extra level when they try and explain it clearly to somebody who doesn't understand what they're saying. So that mixed ability grouping works on both ends. And beyond that, we love the UK Maths Challenge. That's a big part, and we like to build around that. There's a club that supports students to practice for those problem-solving tests that happen all across the country. Every year there's a cipher challenge as well, a code-breaking challenge that's brought out by Southampton University, and more able kids tend to love applying their mathematical problem-solving brains to trying to crack these codes. They're always a lot of fun, just starting after half term, so we'll be coming back after the break and getting into that. And the Maths Ambassadors program as well, our subject leaders, they're some of our finest mathematicians in the older year groups. They love to help out with all the sorts of different events that we do, even going into the primary schools in the past and offering some support there. So just a few of the things. And similarly in English.
Yeah, so we have some similar focus on competitions, particularly our creative writing competitions. We have some that we run within school and some that are national ones that we really encourage all of our students to take part in, but particularly those ones that need that extra challenge. We've had some very successful winners of those competitions, which has been lovely. In addition to that, we have a book club. It's an invitation book club for some of our students that require more challenge, where they read some additional material and they talk about that on a much higher level. That's also something that we're starting to engage with other schools in. So we're hoping that this year is going to be the year that lots of schools come together and work on that as well. We've got an opportunity for them to be student librarians, to take part in the student newspaper, and we also have a lot of trips taking place, like theatre trips, trips to the globe. We're hoping for a Key Stage 4 trip to the British Library and some careers talks. We're also partnered with the Royal Shakespeare Company, so we don't teach Shakespeare in kind of the traditional way behind a desk. We use a lot of the techniques that the Royal Shakespeare Company themselves use with actors and exploring the text, and hopefully that engages a lot of particularly our higher ability students as well.
Yeah. Okay, so supposing just for a moment I were a year 7 student and I was going to be joining next September. Can you give me some idea about what an English lesson might look like.
I absolutely can. We have a little look.
Or if I click on slides, there we go.
That's set. So we look at a range of skills from oracy, reading in terms of comprehension and analysis, and a variety of writing styles. We are looking at fiction and non-fiction writing styles in Year 7, so particularly things like writing to persuade and argue. And the big focus in our fiction is on descriptive at the beginning and then narrative. Year 7s who have just joined us have just been looking at descriptive writing at the moment, and some of the key skills taught in that particular area are looking at language techniques. So we teach the language techniques and the key terminology, identify them in other writers' work and talk about the effect of them, and then we ask students to begin to build those into their own work. Really challenging them to perhaps look at their writing from a more imaginative point of view. So particularly with their narration, can you play around with the reader's expectations and do something a little unexpected? We look at how to structure their work, which is often something quite new to students. So rather than just structuring in paragraphs, thinking about techniques that they can use to engage and change atmosphere, and lots of activities to develop vocabulary range. A lot of them in Year 7 are linked to images. So as you can see here, if you have the screen share, this particular task is to write a description inspired by this image. And this is a piece of work. It's actually produced by one of our new Year 7 cohort in recent weeks. I'll just have a little read of that to you. So it says, the blue sky was calm, unlike the clouds who were teasing the lonely mountain. The mountain longed to fly in the sky, but it knew that it was forever stuck in a monotonous landscape. Down below, the trees couldn't have cared less. They danced in the breeze, their emerald locks swaying in the wind and their cools mocking the forlorn mountain. The Cyan Sea played with the shore, pretending to try to grasp it, but always letting go. Shrubs stood in awe of the trees, because one day they would be just like them. Everyone was one big family, the beach, all apart from the lonely mountain. So that just demonstrates some of the expertise that students developing in structure by narrating from the mountain rather than someone sort of walking along the beach. Lots of techniques in there used for effect and really starting to develop that vocabulary range. On top of that, as I said, they do go on to write speeches and non-fiction pieces as well as stories. And then the other part is reading and exploration. So that will often include reading a range of texts and discussing their personal opinions of them, maybe characters or events. But there's a really big push on them justifying their interpretations at this level. So collecting evidence from that text and evaluative debates about their interpretation in comparison to somebody else's. We've got some examples here of some of the questions that they would look at that are probably more traditional to the style that they may have been exposed to at primary. And then after that, and alongside that throughout the year, we go on to look at their analytical work. So that is when we start to pull apart the evidence that they select and really think about language choices within it, how they create effects, why the writer would want to have that deliberate effect. If you can see the screen share, there is an example there of the diagram that we use with Year 7 to introduce that skill. Below that, we've got an example of a grid of questions that students can access. And as you can see, that's got a purple push element on the board there. And also to the left-hand side, just an example of the structures and the way that we teach students how to express their writing analytically, because that's perhaps a style of writing that they may not have come across until they get to Wixham's Academy. Mr. White.
Yeah.
If I were in maths in Year 7.
Yeah, so just show you through one really key idea that we introduce in Year 7 and really build on throughout their time at Wixham's. So this 4-box grid method really underlines our thinking of proportion and how central it is to the maths that goes on throughout their course. So let me just walk you through it. A 4-box grid method is very, very simple, but we can use it for measurements, we can use it for recipe problems, money problems, speed, scale drawings, pie charts, all of these sorts of things. Loads that you can do with it. And the one rule is that you only multiply or divide. That's the fundamental of proportion. And so that applies to this grid. You can do it across, you can do it top to bottom, but so long as you multiply or divide, you're going to be all right. So this is an example of 3 boxes already filled in. We've stripped away all the context. This is just numbers. And the students are encouraged to recognize how the 12 turns into a 3. which is of course divide by 4, and you apply that over on the right-hand side, meaning that whilst the 12 turns into a 3, the 20 turns into a 5. And this can be really, really powerful. It's a simple idea that the kids pick up quite quickly, but we apply it all over the place. So one quick example lesson that I'd like to share with you is this idea of increasing by a percentage. Again, a topic that we'd cover in year 7. And this particular lesson structure that I'm about to show you, again, we apply across all sorts of different topics. So you might have noticed there the 4 areas we've got are silent teacher, then narration, then your turn, and intelligent practice. And I'll explain what those 4 are as we go through. The silent teacher model is shown on this screen here. So this would be a silent classroom effectively. Now, and it would be the teacher demonstrating, but not talking through it at the same time. The reason we do that is it encourages the students to consider for themselves what the explanation might be for what they are seeing. And the second step that follows this is that they are then told to sort of provide the commentary. It's a slightly more active way of learning. A teacher stood at the board simply demonstrating can tend to be a little passive. So that's why we prefer this model. On this occasion, I'm going to do the one on the left. To increase by 40% using this method, we'd show that the 40 that we started with, well, that corresponds to 100%, the original amount. But we're interested in a 20%. So in order to turn this into 20%, we divide by 5, both left and right. And so the 40 becomes an 8. And that tells us what the increase should be. 40 added to the 8 gives us 48. Now, certainly not the only method, but this ties in with so many other areas of mathematics by laying it out like this. So following that example, which in class would be done in silence, we ask the students to explain what it is they've just seen. And it's their opportunity again, particularly for those that are more confident in their maths, to show that they can articulate what it is they do. And then following that, rather than copying down, again, a passive example, they're encouraged to do the one on the right, which is titled Your Turn there. And that's a slightly more active way of then sort of doing the same thing, walking in the footsteps of the teacher effectively, and about the similar steps, which would look a little bit like that. And then following all of that, we use tasks that look a little like this, which are called intelligent practice. Now, certainly when I was at school and when I started teaching, most of the practice in maths classes would have then been open a textbook or go for a worksheet, and you'd have had a bunch of random questions which would have encouraged you to do the same task over and over and over and get better at it, which might have its place. This is slightly, there's something else going on here, because these are not 6 random questions. These are 6 carefully selected questions that each connect one to the other. The variation from one question to another is very, very small. Most everything stays the same as you move from question 1 to question 2. But that's intentional, because as most things stay the same, but one thing changes, it encourages students to look for the mathematical pattern. So the students that are perhaps less confident in what they're doing can work through these 6 questions and gain some practice at the task that the lesson is about. But particularly the more confident, we'd encourage them not only to be doing this, but looking to see what it is that connects, say, question 1 with question 2. And how would you expect that to affect your answer? What is the link between question 5 and question 6? What impact is that likely to have on the solution? And can you predict what that will be before you ever get there? All of which are really exciting mathematical ways of thinking. So there's those of you that have been ignoring me and working through those. That should be what you've got. What else to say? Oh yeah, calculators. So let's get that in early. We rely a lot on calculators. The GCSE course has 3 papers ultimately when they're in year 11, 2 of which rely on a calculator. So it's one area which secondary differs quite strongly from primary school, although some of them might have used a calculator. Certainly their proficiency with the calculator has got to increase significantly. So one of these class with Casio calculators is the one that we'd expect to be starting with. And you know, I think that's pretty much everything that I would probably want to say there. Shall we go to Q&A? Do you think now's a good moment?
Let's see what people want to know.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
it looks like. Oh,
shall I read
sorry,
out that first? Right. Top. My daughter would like to know what support you provide if they are struggling in class. Well, I hope we covered bits of that, but do you want to you want to go through it again?
Yes, so that would come through a one-to-one conversation with that student where we would then personalise it for them. So it could be that we would need to break down the task slightly more. It could be that we would need to point them towards a blue clue or something to use with on the board, or a resource within the classroom. Or it could be that we recap the things from the last task and apply them. So it would depend on the circumstance, but it would always be personalised to that student, and the teacher would address that concern. We've had quite a few about setting. In year 7, they are not set. They are taught in their form groups in order to build those relationships and that confidence. We don't set in maths and English in the traditional way. So they are put into groups from year 8 onwards. Traditional setting would usually mean that we would just look at their test scores and we would say, okay, the top 30 test scores are going together and the next 30 test scores. We're not always comfortable with doing that because we know that students can have an off day. We know that students can have a really good day and then sit there for the next year a little bit unsure of what I'm talking to them about. So me and Mr. White actually meet together in the summer. We look at each student individually and we do talk about their attainment, obviously, but we also talk about their learning skills, their confidence level, what kind of targets they are working on, the relationships that they have with particular teachers, their strengths, their weaknesses, and we look at where best to place that student. So, for example, I have a year 9 group at the moment that are together because they all need to develop in one particular area. Their grades are slightly different, which is why we have that teach the top philosophy, but we support them with other resources or challenge further. But we are all working on one part of our analysis together. And that tends to be my specialism as a teacher. So they've been paired with me in order to help them in that way. So year 7 is form groups. Year 8 to 11 is groupings, but not based purely on a test score.
And added to that, don't mind.
Yeah,
Jump in there. So it's part of our ambitions for everybody, every student at Wixham's, that we really believe in the potential of every single student. And there's a potential in perhaps a traditional model of setting that you're making decisions about what part of the course a particular student can access at each point. I'm really proud to say that every student across years 7, 8, and 9, and even to a large extent into year 10, has got the opportunity to access every single part of the course. Now, I know that in English it's one paper for every student, but in maths, we have to consider a foundation or a higher tier ultimately. But it's great that we are able to leave that decision really late. Every year 7 student, every year 8 student, every year 9 student can access the entire course, be sitting either foundation or higher tier. We do have to make some decisions about that come year 10. It's fundamental to our belief in the potential of every single student and our ambitions for them that we stick to these more mixed ability groupings and giving those that are confident and those that are less so, everybody the opportunity to excel, really. So I hope
and to access all of that material, but just at a pace that is more suitable, or in a style that is more suitable to those. So all students in English are taught exactly the same topic, same book, same focuses, but it might be that the way in which we approach it is slightly different, or the speed at which we approach it is slightly different.
Yeah. And I guess that links a little to another question that's popped up there. How many students are there per class? Again, that will be one of the things that varies between these groups. So all accessing the same material. The size of the groups does vary quite a bit. I would say between 30 to as low as 12 or 15 does happen, doesn't it? And that's one of the ways in which we can make sure that those that need a bit more support to access the same course can do it. There are kids that will thrive in a class of 30 students, and those that will need instead the supportive environment of a smaller group where they're going to get a little more that sort of support. That changes the dynamic of the group, and it's one of the ways in which it is. So there's no one answer to that. It's between probably 12 up to 30.
Absolutely. We've got some questions about if you have a student joining us in year 8 and year 9. A lot of those things would transfer over in English. They are studying literature and language the whole way through. At year 8, we start to introduce that in perhaps a more complex level, getting them ready for Key Stage 4. Some of the texts that we study include Anne Frank's diary, Hope Springs, poetry. We look at A Midsummer Night's Dream and a lot of transactional writing. When they hit year 9, they actually enter our GCSE stage here at Wixham's Academy. In English, we do not begin our GCSE text until year 10. So we use year 9 as a sort of foundations GCSE skills year. So they will study a lot of units that are very similar to the year 10 and 11 ones, but with slightly different text, to train them in those skills ready to transfer to their GCSE material.
Question do you use Chromebook to set assignments for your pupils? So I suppose Chromebook not specifically, but the students do have access to a laptop. They certainly have done up until now, and yeah, we use those certainly in all sorts of different ways. So we love TT Rockstars, for example, in maths, which a lot of them will be familiar with from primary. But you know, I'm sure I don't need to say how fundamental confidence with multiplication tables are to all of the maths that they do. So we continue with that. We subscribe to a great package called Maths Watch as well, which supports their independent learning in all sorts of ways. It really came into its own through the recent lockdown as well, and really allowed a lot of students to continue working really effectively on their maths. And so they're just a couple of ways in maths that we rely on the technology. Similarly in English, any particular ways you point out?
Most of ours is set through Show My Homework, so we don't use Chromebook. Most of it is Show My Homework, and we also have homework booklets that we use throughout the term for certain things. So they will alternate between a teacher task, a literacy booklet, and their reading homeworks. So some of them are paper and some of them are Show My Homework. I've just noticed that we've got one about creative writing classes and creative interpretation. We really want students to be creative. That is our aim, and to interpret that task as they can. That said, we are teaching more than one style of writing. So creative writing sort of opens up into specialist areas at secondary. So there are certain requirements of each style of writing, and we want them to be able to notice those different things and what they have to include in that style. But we will always push them to be as imaginative as we can be.
Question at the top says, twins in Wixham Street Primary, what are the chances of them not being together in the same sets for both English and maths? So in year 7, certainly for English and maths, they'll be taught in their tutor group. So that's really a question about whether they're going to be in the same tutor group. Mm-hmm. That's a question I'd bounce onto the head of years. They really like to take on board everybody's preferences. It's a very sort of individualized approach. So if that matters, I don't know whether they really want to be in the same group or really don't want to be in the same group. But one way or another, it's a conversation that the head of years would love to have with anybody starting, to get to know the individuals who are coming to us early, and make sure we can do everything to support those sorts of preferences.
Absolutely. And then as they move into year 8 and 9, it will depend on them individually as well. So obviously we will look at them as an individual and think about their skills. So if they've got similar skills, there's the potential they could end up in the same group. If they're very different in their approach and their style, they could end up in a different group. So it would depend on sort of form, class, and then how they take to those subjects and what kind of strengths they have. I've just noticed one for English. Do we provide the books that they read? We do provide all of the books at school. At GCSE level, we are encouraging students to have their own copy because we're encouraging them to read it more than once before the exam. But all of the texts taught in class are provided in the lesson time.
There's one question we've got. How do you deal with helping a child with a lack of confidence to express themselves?
Again, that comes down entirely to that individual student. So we really work to get to know our students on an individual level. And then there's a variety of things that we can put in place. It can be that we discuss with them things that they find useful and things they do not want us to put them on the spot for at the beginning, and that we build in some kind of plan of little targets of what we're going to do along the way. If it's for things like speeches, for example, a lot of our students give speeches and a few of them really lack confidence at the beginning. There's lots of different things we can do for that, whether they run through it with us at lunchtime and practice in the room and the space. I've had a class, really lovely class. They knew someone was really nervous. They all turned around and faced the other way so that they could do their speech just looking at the back of people. So it entirely depends on your child, and we will try to get to know your child as best as we can and cater that to them personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's nothing like, more than anything, we want to make sure that the students come away with a love for our relative subjects. We're both really enthusiastic about what we teach, and
Absolutely.
that goes for everybody here. And you know, the teacher's real fear is that a kid goes away feeling any negative feelings about their subject. So yeah, we'd love to get to know what it is that is behind that lack of confidence sometimes, and supporting the different ways that they need.
Just noticed one about homework.
Yeah,
how much homework will students be given per week, and typically how long do they have to complete it? They have a variety of tasks in English, so it could be one task a week, it could be 3 smaller tasks, but in time frame it tends to add up to about an hour a week for English. For most of the time, apart from GCSE, who are starting to get a little bit more, so sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's an hour and a half, depending on whether they need to do some revision and an activity, or some reading and an activity. We do encourage students to read for about an hour a week as well.
The math homework tasks are perhaps a little more structured. The homework sheets that go home with each student every week are intentionally very similar week on week. They are focused on really key skills so rather than being sort of topic based, although a lesson, a series of lessons over a particular month might focus on say indices or some other mathematical subject, the homeworks cover the full range, so the students can keep on accessing from their memory that wide variety of mathematical topics. So the homework tends to look like that. Again, similar sort of amount of time expected, about an hour, but they will look very similar week on week.
I'm just thinking that to clarify as well, because I know we had some questions about year 8 and year 9 new starters. If you're in year 9 new starter, we begin something is similar, so you'll still have a variety of booklets and online tasks, but we start something called lagged learning homework. So if you have studied potentially, if you've studied Macbeth in the first term and the next term you move on to look at creative writing, whilst you're studying in creative writing in class, some of your homeworks will link to Macbeth to help you remember all of those things and keep those fresh in your mind at the same time.
Great. Well, unless there are any other questions coming in, I think we dealt with the only one that I can see at the moment.
I think so.
Tell you what,
hopefully we've answered everything everybody wants to know.
We're really excited. Every year meeting a new cohort of year 7s is a real highlight. To bring, you know, their enthusiasm and their fresh characters into the school is a real bonus. So yeah, I hope we've been helpful to you. I hope the process of finding a secondary school goes well for everyone watching. Thank you for choosing to watch the pair of us. And yeah, really helpful questions. Thank you for everyone who's put a question up. That's been great.
Fantastic.
Well, I think we're done. Thank you very much.